Okay, let's jump right into the cancer numbers, as I have those just before we go into the transplant here on Monday. Show you three graphic representations up here. The first one is going to be what you've seen before with the added data from this past Monday's blood work, which is showing that the M protein is at 5.5, which is excellent. Very, very, very good. Now, the second graphic is going to split out that graphic from number one and focus on the last month's worth of data. And now remember, we saw that M protein slip up to 5.9 at that first graphic, and then we added that dexamethazone, that steroid, hopefully slow down the cancer so it wouldn't move back up. We were awaiting the transplant and we were without chemotherapy. And as you can see by this data, very excellent. Not only would I say it stopped it, with 3 data points, you can say there's a slight downward trend as it went from 5.9, 5.7 to this most recent result of 5.5. Again, excellent. So as far as the cancer news goes, it's looking really, really good. You can't really ask for anything better going into this transplant. The third graphic is correlating the M protein, which I always speak of, and this bone biopsy I've talked about as well. Remember, I've got that bone biopsy about a month ago. Okay, now the bone biopsy gives you the actual true value on a relative basis, percent-wise, of the cancerous plasma cells in my bone marrow. To do that, you have to take a core sample out of your pelvic bone. Not very fun, not very pleasant, as it's painful. Let me talk about now the M protein. The M protein is a blood test, much easier to collect, and that then is put into electrophoresis where you separate out the M protein by itself. What is the M protein? It's actually what the cancer cell is making abnormally. In my case, it's called IgG, an abnormal protein, very, very high, 100 times higher than normal. And you can see here from this data that just using M protein results correlates very, very well with bone marrow results. As my bone marrow, which was taken back in September of 2018 when this whole thing started, I had 100% of the cells in that sample were all cancerous. And that correlated to an M protein level at the time of 11 grams per deciliter, which again my oncologist said was the highest he'd ever seen in 40 years of oncology. Now you can see from that data that the M protein is at 5.5, and the bone marrow biopsy that was done roughly at the same time was at 50%. So you can't get any better than that. I mean, 5.5 is half of 11. So it's really giving you a good indication just from the M protein of what's going on internally with the cancer cells. I hope that explains that. The bottom line from this data is excellent compared to September of 2018 as I moved it down 50%, but still 50% of the cancer in my bone marrow is still high. So hopefully we hit this with the stem cell transplant and I get a much bigger reduction in the load of the cancer cells, which we'll find out 6 weeks now after the stem cell transplant. That's when we'll first take some results to see what the effects are of the transplant on the cancer itself. I'm just sitting here waiting 48 hours from now. By the time you guys are viewing this, I'll be receiving that lethal dose of Melphalan, that high dose chemo. I think it's at 200 mg per kilogram. I say lethal dose, don't be afraid, that's really what it is, because you're destroying all the cells in your bone marrow. You have no immune system. Essentially, if you don't have the stem cell recovery, you would die. So Monday I go in, 1 o'clock they hang the high dose chemo. 2 days later on Wednesday, my stem cells, which were collected a couple weeks ago and are in nitrogen freeze, will be hung up and come in to rescue my bone marrow. And then we wait some fraction of time. It takes them a while to find their way in and to start differentiating. In that process of the stem cells trying to differentiate is called engrafting. So if you hear me talk about stem cells engrafting, that's what I'm talking about. finding their way to the bone marrow, and then making red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are good things, and hopefully the cancer is whacked on down from the high dose chemo, and these stem cells start taking over and making the things that are good for the bone marrow. Oh, and of course, as always, I almost forgot, please, questions, comments below, anything about the stem cell transplant, the high dose chemo, whatever. Cheers. Talk to you next week. Bye.